The next report that I have this month is staffing and enrollment projections for the 2021-2022 school year. So Marianne, if you could go to board book page 37, please. This report as a whole contains several different reports, so please stop me if you have any questions on a particular page before we go to the next page. So on board book page 37, this starts by including a report of classes that are under 20 and over the caps for this school year. So the first chart really is looking at the classes that received board approval back in March because they were under 20, and then looking at where they are now in terms of enrollment. So as you can see, of the classes that received board approval, all of them currently remain under 20, and then 2 of them were canceled because they were part of the German sequence. The next chart lists classes that are only taught once a day that were above 20 or at 20 in the spring, but they're under more than 2 under their cap. So as you can see, some classes have enrollment increased since the spring, and then some have had their enrollment decrease since the spring. And then lastly, the final chart shows classes that are taught multiple periods of the day, and this chart shows classes that when we sectioned in the spring, they were more than 2 students over the cap, and we're providing an update on where those classes are now in terms of enrollment. As you can see, only string orchestra is more than 2 students above the established cap, which the established caps we use as guidelines. Board book page 39, the next page, includes a final staffing summary. So this chart shows the overall staffing from this school year compared to last school year. And if you can look on the left, on the bottom, you'll see that from last school year to this school year, we decreased FTE by 0.6 FTE in terms of what was actually utilized. On the right-hand side of this document, you can see that the class averages overall continue to decrease, and they remain rather low for core classes and intervention classes. I believe they were around 24 for core classes and 16 students for our intervention classes.
Kristen, is that 0.8 decrease? We're at 105.6.
I was referring to the FTE that was utilized. Last year we had a 0.2, but we did not utilize it.
So it was really 106.2 and we're at 105.6.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
The next page in the report lists the feeder enrollment for all grade levels, which we use then to project and predict our enrollment. There was a question submitted on this page about the outplaced students. So the feeder outplaced, the feeder schools have 18 students currently outplaced, but that includes students that are in 5th through 8th grade. So we only anticipate receiving 5 additional freshmen next year that are currently outplaced. Due to some students either graduating or aging out of the program at the end of this school year, we anticipate the total number of outplaced students staying about the same for next school year. So there shouldn't be much of an increased cost in regards to that aspect. Going to the next page are the enrollment projections for next year. So I'm projecting a total of 1,648 students, which does include our students in our transition program and students that are outplaced. Removing students from that total, it's on the very bottom chart and it's in fine print, would be 1,599 students. This is very similar to our enrollment this year, which you'll see in a second. After removing the students in the transition program and the students that are outplaced, our current enrollment is 1,602 students. So moving on to the last page, which I know is what people are primarily interested in. This report includes the FTE projections for next year. Before I jump into explaining this chart, I do want to add a caveat. Due to COVID, there is a possibility that enrollment could go up or it could go down. That certainly could have an impact on our transfer students. So this year especially, this is a projection and something that we're monitoring, and that certainly will impact what I'm about to talk about with FTE. So if you look on the left side of this column, or this report, I'm sorry, you'll see those two yellow boxes. The top yellow box outlines what our current required FTE is. So that's school counselors, social workers, instructional coaches, really looking at FTE that we need to provide that may not translate to having 27 students in your classroom in front of you. And then, so the chart below is looking at how that FTE, required FTE changes for the following school year. As you can see, there's really not a whole lot of change. Down the middle of the report, starting at the top, you'll see that's outlining currently what our enrollment is, which is 1602, and then looking at how many students are currently enrolled in 5 classes, 6 classes, or 7 classes, to figure out what our FTE should be for this year. And so as you can see, we are at 105 FTE, and the chart is showing that we needed 104.1 FTE this year. So if everything were to work out exactly as planned, we would be overstaffed. Certainly we have some bad breaks, right? That's why you have a pre-algebra class at 10. And that's where that first initial report comes in, is, not everything can have 25 students in a class just because of the way things happen to fall or happen to be scheduled this year.
Kristen, can I jump in? The reason it says 105 on the right and the chart on the left says budgeted at FTE 105.6, remember we had an unexpected retirement in German, and so we did not fill that position, but it was budgeted for. So we had the budget and staffing for 105.6, but it's at 105 due to that unexpected retirement.
Correct. So next we move into the 3 options presented for next year. They're really, as you can see, I'll go over option A in a minute, but as you can see, the difference is looking at what that average class size would be. So option A is looking at taking our enrollment, our projected enrollment for next year, which is 1,599 students, and then looking at what FTE we would need if we had an average class size of 27. And that would translate to the FTE that you can see on your chart there, which I'm having a hard time reading that, but 104.4, I believe.
Correct.
And then option B would be raising that class average a little bit to 27.25. Obviously, when you raise class size, that's going to lower FTE. And then option C would be aiming to have class averages at 27.5. Obviously, if you look at all 3 options, regardless of which option the board would like to pursue, we will be decreasing FTE next year a little bit. I would suggest aiming at 104 FTE, which is halfway between option A and option B, and then having the flexibility to add that additional 0.4 FTE if that is needed as we're doing the sectioning process. Again, with COVID, I just am a little hesitant to make a firm recommendation just because we don't know how things are going to play out in terms of our enrollment. And so having that flexibility to start and aim for 104, but to be able to go up to 104.4 should that be needed would certainly be my recommendation.
Is 102.9 option C, that's if these property tax collections keep coming in lower than expected and the deficit comes in. I mean, we have a tendency here to budget and come in under what we budget. But hearing tonight that we're still chasing over 300,000 of property taxes, and that was already on a reduced budget of property tax collection. Remember, this staffing enrollment is just a projection, so you get an idea of what we're preparing for, because we're already starting to pick classes for next year. But you're going to approve the levy in December. You start talking about budget in January. Somebody submitted a question in regards to, well, are there classes that we can cut mid-year? We've staffed these classes. Students have signed up for these classes. Staff has been hired for these classes. So, with the exception of the German class, we can't make changes in the middle of the year or collapse classes in the middle of the year. We still have a requirement to pay that teacher and honor their contract, and we still have an honor to those students who are taking those courses, whether it's virtual or in person. And so I don't think that's a realistic option. We laid out 3 options here today. We went through this again earlier this week, so that if budget and the impact of COVID and the impact of the governor possibly cutting school funding because the fair tax didn't pass, all of those items, if those come into play, this just lays out for you kind of like worst case scenario, best case scenario. I would imagine, like Kristen said, it comes somewhere in between A and B, but we have to see how this pandemic plays out. We have to see how the school funding plays out, and we also have to see where property tax collection comes in, because we are 90% of our revenue comes from property tax collection. Am I correct with that? I think it's 90 or it might be 88, but I mean, it is significantly relies significantly upon property tax collection.
So what does this look like if you only have 7, instead of 7 periods, you have 6 periods?
We had talked about that a long time ago. Obviously, that's something you could still, if you took 6 classes, you could still graduate with, for 4 years, you'd have 24 credits, which would still allow you to pursue some additional electives. I would not, is that an option so that you can keep class sizes low and still, but still help achieve some budgetary needs? That is an option. I would not recommend that as something that we should be at the top of our list. I think that's something you look at when you're in dire straits. And then another way to phase that in is maybe you only allow juniors and seniors to take 7 classes. But I don't think we're at that point yet. But yes, if you took 6 classes, that would, it would reduce some staffing. I have not run a model with 6 classes.
What about,
So you could run the model.
Correct. You would just
Yes.
take the 959 that's in the 7 and put it in all 6. So you have 3 through 5, and then we could run that.
Okay.
so my first thought when I looked at this was that top, the 2021 classes under 20 for board approval that are not anywhere near the enrollment sizes that we would like to run the classes. What about offering those as online classes?
Well,
Is that a possibility?
AP Music Theory is a capstone, AP Chemistry is a capstone, Honors French 4 is a capstone, Honors German obviously is a capstone, AP Spanish is a capstone. So you have kids that have participated in a 4-year class, have put in 4 years and have kind of, to reach that capstone, we talk about high rigor, right, or being a high rigor school and a competitive school. So I don't know if that's an option necessarily, offer those online. The pre-algebra is an intervention for our students that are coming in below requirement.
That would be the only one that I would say, when I look at
think-
this, that would be outside of that,
Yeah, I
right?
think-
Because they're younger students and they need the remediation or the scaffolding necessary, because that's a prerequisite to so many other things. But these other ones, again, like you said, they're capstones, right? They're at the top of the heap, so.
Right, so I don't think we want to have kids work hard and then all of a sudden in their senior year or their last year of a class and they put in 4 years or something and then kind of push them to virtual. What I think, what has worked well for us in the past is we've tried to keep class sizes low in our core classes, math, science, and English. Obviously, you heard a lot from science when we were pushing that boundary on lab classes. So what I need, the direction I think that would come up better for the board is not getting into what classes we should run, just what dollar amount or what are you looking to protect or what are you looking to implement. Like I said, at this point, we're still okay financially where I don't think we need to go to the extremes of do we go to 6 classes. But should that be on our radar in a few years? It could be. The other thing I would say is, are there some things under required FTE that we can maybe modify or adjust? There are some things that will help. We can adjust or move some things around or combine some things. So the purpose of this exercise is just to give the board an idea, as well as this is something that always comes up during discussions with the board and the teachers union. So just an idea of, how we're doing it to be transparent and how this is figured out. I think we're still a little while away from having to make any final decisions, but it's a good idea to lay out for the board. We have some retirements, so our budget picture is intended to improve slightly next year. So I think we, have to kind of really continue to come back to this December, January, February.
Well, and I think with, I'm not suggesting that we go to, a 6-period day, but I want to know what that looks like financially, right?
Okay.
Because down the line, we do need to think about that. That's a trigger, so to speak. That's a trigger that we could fight about, and we're not going to do. But,
Sure.
And I'm not suggesting we do that. And I also suggest that we talk about, at some point, we talk about this, because I don't want this. We go to, and we say, okay, it's 104, and then we're in a COVID situation, and we're back to this half day, this and that, and how are we doing some of these classes? And we need to be able to pull these triggers. I mean, a kid takes lifeguarding, for Christ's sake. You can't do lifeguarding virtually. So that class we shouldn't be running next year if we're not in the pool, period. And so I'm just saying there's, becomes a nice meditating class. He seems to enjoy it. So, but we just got to think about what this looks like. And I think the sooner we start talking about what it looks like next year, the better we're going to be prepared for it. But, okay, let's move on.
I think we'll continue to refer back to this. Kristen and I can give you an example of what that model will look like. I think you're 100% right as we get through into second semester and start looking at budgeting. And we also see where we are with the pandemic and see how close we are getting back to normal. I understand, there's some courses that I think you bring up a good example, like if we're not going to be in full person and can't have kids, doing those, but, we have to make some teacher commitments by March. And so that's why we start talking about this in November. So,
Okay. Well,
it's on our radar, and I think we'll continue this conversation with also trying to implement 50% and all the other things we're doing, and we'll get to you.
well, that certainly is. We have to make teacher commitments in March. That was an interesting point after today's discussion, but
Right.
I digress.
Okay.
Okay, keep going. You got more?
I got more, but later, so
Oh,
I'm
boy.
done
I
for
hardly wait.
now.
She's done for right now.
I know I had more questions.
Yeah, I think we're in a good place right now.